All right. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're finding us today. Thank you for joining our webinar series at Crownpeak. Today, we're excited. We have two really great hosts and panelists from the digital accessibility space, and we'll introduce them shortly. But we really appreciate everyone joining us. Gonna dive into some really interesting and meaty topics in the digital accessibility space today. In particular, why we wanted to come together and share some of our insights was some of the recent regulations and new laws that are coming down the pike, most notably in Europe, with a new law coming out to focus around digital accessibility compliance for public websites. And so we want to touch on that topic in more detail and share some of the learnings that we've been able to compile over the last few months. So with that, we'll jump in and I'll make some introductions. My name is Chris Segala. I'm the Chief of Staff at Crownpeak and very focused around our digital accessibility offerings in the market under the product Digital Quality Management. And with us is two individuals I am very well respected in the space, and the ones that I've come to get to know very well and really enjoyed working with. Catherine Putt from Crownpeak and Jenna Reardon from Illumino. So Catherine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Catherine Putt, Solutions Engineer here at Crownpeak, based out of our London office. I help organizations build out and create best practice governance processes and governance programs utilizing our DQM tool. So really happy to be here today talking about accessibility.
Hi,
and Jenna, do you want to introduce yourself? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the intro, Chris. And likewise to people I respect in the industry. And we've had lots of great chats, and today will be just another one. But I'm co-founder of Illumino, as Chris said, and what I focus on mostly is customer solutions and helping organizations find a unique approach to accessibility that works for them, really moving away from one size fits all so organizations can be successful and really achieve their goals. So that's my focus, and looking forward to chatting about that today.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us. We're really happy to have you. So as I jump into the meat and potatoes here, let's kind of level set a bit on what we're going to be talking about. You may hear some acronyms thrown around and some references to terminology that maybe is new, and some of the concepts and topics that we're talking about are relatively new, even within the even for those that are well versed in the digital accessibility space. And for those that aren't, this will be new and informative. So what we're going to be talking about initially is the new law that's coming out in Europe, which is called the Equal Access Act. We'll refer to it as the EAA. For those that have some familiarity in the space, the digital accessibility space, it's very similar to the law that's been passed for some time now in the US with the Americans with Disability Act and Title III, which governs digital properties under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So a very similar set of laws and requirements, with sort of the nuance being that these are focused around the European Union and specifically addressed towards public websites as opposed to sort of private and government websites. So you hear us talk about that. EAA is a new law in Europe. The European Union we'll reference as the EU, and some of the previous laws that have been put in place in Europe that are sort of the precedent or the precursors to this this new law coming down with the Web Accessibility Directive, the WAD, which was passed in 2016 and is more relevant to the public sector. We'll kind of touch on that and give you some comparisons there. So with that, I'll jump in and let's start just kind of high level, Catherine and Jenna, just to sort of level set on the topics at hand here as we go into finer detail. But maybe both of you can just share from your perspective. You're in this space every day. You're talking to customers, prospects, helping organizations really start to build maturity around digital accessibility within their companies. So as you look out at the space today, both kind of from a solutioning and problem solving perspective, as well as sort of a compliance perspective, what does that accessibility landscape look like today globally? Catherine, do you want to start?
Yeah, so globally, at the moment with accessibility, we're finding there's a lot of difference between the different regions and how different organizations, depending on where their focus is on from a business perspective, how they're responding to the different accessibility laws globally. So specifically, America, there's quite a focus around reducing legal risk or reducing mitigation versus other countries like Europe focusing on accessibility being the right thing to do, and the different changes that they can make to help improve performance for things like SEO and how it relates to the crossover between SEO and accessibility. But I think one of the key drivers or the key consistencies is that how organizations are reporting globally across accessibility and accessibility compliance, so reporting against the WCAG guidelines and reporting against those as well, but also accessibility being part of wider governance processes and governance programs for organizations, as well as moving into trends like, and the most recent one that I'm seeing is diversity and inclusion, and that crossover between accessibility and inclusion, so including people with disabilities, providing people with those equal access and equal opportunities as well. And how it can, be a way that organizations can also actively show their commitments to things like inclusivity and diversity through, not only having the message on their website, but also, having the website being inclusive itself as well. Jenna, I don't know if there's other similar things that you're seeing or different trends that you've picked up on.
Yeah, pretty standard across the board. I mean, that's what we're seeing as well. I think regardless of where organizations are along their maturity curve with accessibility, they've tried it, they haven't really dipped their toe in yet. We're seeing the urgency is really increasing globally, and that's with organizations knowing they need to do it. As Catherine, as you said, it's a responsibility socially. Organizations are liking it from a brand perspective, but I think companies are seeing themselves fall behind if they haven't started yet. So it's not something we can really kick the can on anymore. And what we're seeing, with the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, pointing towards the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 AA, Europe is really there right now. So it's a trend, a pattern that is going to repeat itself and follow suit for businesses.
Yep, absolutely. In some part, it's pretty exciting times in digital accessibility, in that we're seeing growing momentum and a growing groundswell of action and attention. On the flip side of that, it's fairly concerning, right? Because we understand that there's a long way to go for us to continue to meet the needs of those users that are requiring more accessible experiences. And so there's still a ton of work to be done, but the growing attention, both like regulatory and from a pure business standpoint, is kind of the driving forces that are required to really sort of incite change here. So it's exciting, certainly exciting times for all in this space. So transitioning the topic, we've touched on it a few times now, but just to start to go into a little bit more detail to share for those that are with us, that made this new law in Europe, the EAA, may be new for some that are with us today. And so we wanted to just give you all a sense of what the law entails and things that you can start to put in the back of your mind as you start to think about your own business's journey and sort of compliance process as this starts to become more real over time. So in June, back in, not too long ago, about a month ago, it marked the day that the EU member states had to pass required EAA implementation laws. So it's just fairly new and hot off the press. But, yeah, maybe Catherine, you can, you live in Europe. It's in your backyard here, so obviously it has some sort of personal implications as well for how you interact with the brands that you love. But how do you sort of see this new regulation? How is it going to impact the way companies do business, and what should people be thinking about?
Yeah, so this actually originally came about in June 2019 when the EAA officially was adopted by the EU, and they've given till essentially last month, June 28th, for all the member states to enact the different directives for each of their own individual countries. So, while, that's just enacting the laws, they then need to be enforced by July 2025. So that's when you're going to start to see kind of, potentially a similar transition to the way that accessibility is dealt with within America inside these different EU states. Now, I know everyone's like, oh, phew, July 2025, we've got heaps of time. But, accessibility changes don't happen overnight. So while this may seem like, a couple of years away, you need to start thinking about accessibility processes now to ensure that the websites become compliant with the different standards when 2025 does roll around. So by helping to work these into existing processes, helping to upskill, train developers, content editors on what good looks like, it's going to ensure that you're looking good and sitting pretty for 2025. There's also quite a common complaint, or not a common complaint, but a common question that I get from companies who are based over in America is the impact of, how does this affect them? Or how, we're an American-based company, but if they have sites that are based over in these EU countries, then it's going to be relevant for them to get them compliant and reporting to the different WCAG standards and the different WCAG legislations for each of these individual countries, because they can also vary across the different countries about what they're working towards and how they are working towards achieve them. So yeah, there could be changes in terms of how you're reporting or the different processes that are in place that they need to really start thinking about.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, 2025 seems like a far off date, but if you start to break that down, is where, really our call to action here is, don't wait, right? Be proactive. Start to think about what that process entails, because to Catherine's point, this stuff won't happen overnight, and you don't want to be caught off guard, right? Come January 2025, that this is a 6-month project. You're cramming 2 years worth of work in 6 months, and doesn't make for a very pleasant experience. So Jenna, curious your thoughts there too. I know you're sitting in the U.S., but obviously interact with a ton of global brands, and kind of had your eye on this piece of legislation for some time. So what are your thoughts on the EAA?
Yeah, definitely planning time to ramp up. What we've seen here is the bury the head in the sand and wait for legal action approach has really hindered some businesses. Once you do that, it's an all hands on deck situation. So if that means putting a marketing initiative on hold, a major product release, whatever it is, because you have to cram that accessibility work in because of a legal issue, then that can be a huge pain. So to the point of being proactive, getting ready for that date, it can make the process a lot easier for everyone, cheaper, because you're doing it proactively instead of reactively. And it also gives your teams time to train and learn. When you're doing things as a rush, immediate project, you're really just trying to get it done, maybe outsourcing to a vendor. So definitely gearing up for that has multiple benefits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the key, and what we've, the team here knows better than anyone, what we often talk to customers about is building sustainable practices around digital accessibility. It's not a one and done, but how does this become kind of a core competency within the teams and the organization to address the requirements of these users, the disabled community, in the process of creating, developing, managing digital experiences, and making that process ingrained, the process for ensuring compliance and therefore inclusion and accessibility, making that process ingrained in the entire journey of the workflow associated with with what I just described around digital creation management, creation and management. And so if you think about it from that context of, we want to get to a place to create sustainability here where there's an active, robust process to do the things we need to do, then this new law becomes just part of that overall journey, right? Because you're already going through that process, already addressing the requirements that are associated with these new laws. And to be frank, it's really just a function of the ADA has been in place for some time. There's growing momentum and attention around the needs to address digital properties and assets within the ADA. Now you have the European law that will go into effect in 2025, and the trend line is there. There's only going to be more and more focus and attention, both regulatory and from a business perspective, on this over time. And so building those sustainable practices today is critical to kind of meet those future requirements. So really interesting kind of shift, right? And starting to think more proactively and sustained kind of excellence here. So yeah, if we think about all of these laws, right? The ADA, the EAA, the WCAG guidelines that kind of support these laws. How do we start to think about, for these organizations that are looking to address these requirements, what are some of the benefits they can start to see? What's the why? Why do we care? Why do we want to address these things as a business? What have you seen that's really started to resonate and sort of drive change and adoption within organizations?
Sure, I'll take that to start, and then Catherine, love to hear your thoughts. But I mean, we really have two buckets, right? The legal requirements and then the right thing to do. So from the legal perspective, the obvious benefit is the risk reduction. The year-over-year cases continue to increase, about 500 cases per year. About 80% of those are e-commerce. So really making sure that you're protected from a compliance standpoint is critical for organizations. Again, we talked about what ramifications legal action could take for a business and detract from other initiatives. But from it's the right thing to do, really an increased market reach and brand appreciation, which is every company's goal in general. But by bringing in accessibility as another initiative, including SEO and other things that you're doing to expand your reach, accessibility is just an added benefit of that. So the more people that you're allowing access to your digital space, especially with the pandemic, so much has moved online. So the more that we can provide that to our entire user base, the better. And then similar to that is a better site user experience. So accessibility, usability really go hand in hand. And just some basic examples that we use are a wheelchair ramp helps moms with strollers, people with shopping carts. Same thing in the digital space. If you're making accessibility, moving forward with your accessibility, then you're going to be making your site just better for all.
Yeah, and I think also following up on that, Jenna, from a brand perspective, how does digital accessibility foster a company's brand reputation, both externally and also internally? So, you know, we've got employees who want to also work for companies with strong diversity and inclusion, and they've, you know, it's not just words, they're actually able to deliver on it. So having digital accessibility properties as well as software for these, or for users when they do come into the organization. So again, it's actually walking the walk. You know, you're not just saying it, it's not just empty words on the website. And then also users also want to support brands that are inclusive, that help to connect with a company story, and also a mission as well, that they are, you know, inclusive. And then obviously inclusive brand campaigns that aren't accessible. So these can be, you know, but ironically, they've got pictures of people, you know, trying to be inclusive, people of different races, genders, sexualities, as well as people with disabilities, but then they're not actually making that content accessible. They're not making it available to all. So, you know, there's some of these, you know, unfortunately they do happen, you know, quite a lot. We see them all over the place as they launch them and change them. So it's just a tangible way that businesses can, you know, walk the talk and demonstrate it with digital accessibilities. So the other kind of key driver is companies being able to, with these different legislations, you know, the EAA, the WCAG, ADA, drive new revenue from these different opportunities as well. Because, you know, there's obviously, it's the right thing to do, as Jenna was saying before, but how can you create tangible metrics that you're reporting back to the business about the different opportunities? So around 15% of the global population have disabilities, and this number is going to increase when families of those living with disabilities are taken into account. And with spending power, that's around 13 trillion per annum that we have in terms of spending power. So the opportunity to, you know, make all these different web properties inclusive, or making them, you know, feel included when they're interacting with these digital properties, you know, there's just so much opportunity out there.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up on that, Catherine, focusing on the EAA, bringing in other digital assets. So there's been a heightened focus on web. The trend is now moving to mobile ticketing systems, ebooks. So when you're talking about some of these inclusive initiatives failing, with the EAA bringing in insight to other digital platforms, it will hopefully help organizations look at this more holistically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's not just the web. It's, you have to think broader in terms of how you're engaging, you know, your customers and your users across, you know, multi-channel, multimodal, multi-device sort of paradigms, which is, you know, obviously the world we live in today. So thinking broader, and then again, that speaks to sort of core processes and how companies can start to build these capabilities into how they, you know, operate and manage digital assets is important to that, because you don't want to go and solve for web, then go and solve for mobile, then go and solve for, you know, X, Y, and Z. You want to kind of build the process that can address multi-channel, multi-device, multimodal sort of requirements as part of that kind of core foundation. So that's a great point, and something that you know, is super relevant for folks on the line to start to think about. Just to kind of pull that thread a little bit more, because obviously, you know, having the insights to start to build towards what we would consider to be best practice, or the most effective way of doing some of this process development and execution, is at the end of the day what we are really here to do, right? That's what we wake up every day and engage with our clients on, and really try and drive those outcomes for. So I think it'd be super useful for everyone on the line to hear from both of you, just, you know, by way of the fact you have so much experience here, around what are some of those best practices that, you know, you've seen work really well, that have high impact. Like, how should people start to think about this, right? If the big message here is about being proactive, driving sustainable practices, because look, XYZ laws are coming and it's going to become more and more of a requirement, what should we do about it, right? How would we start to coach those that have joined us today to start to build towards those best practices?
Yeah, I think one of the key things that we see and can be most helpful is to identify the owners of the company and to make sure the initiative is supported. And that's one of the things that we've seen lacking in a lot of organizations that go to start their accessibility journey, is it's unclear if it's owned by legal or compliance or marketing or dev. And really, you know, someone needs to own it, but everyone needs to be involved in it. And by being involved, that means having funding for it, making sure procurement's involved, that it's a line item, and just having that foundation of the program. And Catherine, do you want to add to that from, you know, more technical perspective?
Yeah, this is actually also, you know, a really great question. But, you know, bringing accessibility into the design process as early as possible, and gathering the different requirements and the different designs. And, you know, one of the really important things is that accessibility is actually a specialty. You know, there's special, you know, qualifications, you know, that you ideally should have for when it comes to accessibility. So it's good to work with and consult with a specialist to make sure that you are doing things the best way, and that they are indeed going to be accessible, and that they are going to help benefit, you know, the user's experience when they're trying to interact with the website. So, having that kind of consultancy and guidance, especially if you haven't gone through this process before, thinking about it at those early stages can really add value and enhance, the experience and what the end result is going to be.
Yeah, great point. Funny you should mention that it's important to engage specialists. We happen to have a few specialists on the line here, and that's what we've been really geared towards developing in terms of our partnership between Crownpeak and Illumino, and bringing those core expertise and specialized services alongside a really powerful software and technology platform to really combine those two elements and those two strengths to provide a really holistic, end-to-end, impactful solution for customers, right? Not just giving them a tool, but going the next step to provide the guidance and the assistance to get to the results that are targeted, right? So that's the key in terms of our partnership. What would you share in addition, Catherine and Jenna, in terms of what that partnership can do relative to what we offer together, relative to this idea of taking those initial steps? What does best practice look like? How can we really kind of supercharge that process for companies?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, and talk about some of these things that I've found. One of the first points I want to make is that no two organizations are the same. So, while everyone is trying to achieve the same thing, which is building an accessible experience, no two organizations really are the same in terms of the processes, the programs that they have in place. Similarities, but everything is different. There's always unique everything's unique between the different clients. So, what I've been able to see is that we've been able to work together to really help each client build accessibility roadmaps, build accessibility plans using both a combination of technology, so automated checks, and then also that manual element that needs to be conformant, but also being able to actually do that at scale in a really cost-effective way. But also, after we've built out that program, then how do you build leadership support? How do you tell the story of the accessibility journey and help to build support, especially at the leadership level as well? And then ensuring that we're setting up these best practices that are integrating accessibility into enterprise organizations, but focusing it and overlaying it with other areas. So, SEO, usability, privacy, legal, and bringing everything together into one really easy to use tool. And then there's also the expert advice and consulting and guidance, because it's great to get an accessibility audit, it's great to get an accessibility report, but when it sits in one person's drawer, one person's inbox, and they don't necessarily know what's next or what to do with it, the key difference that I've really found with this partnership is the expert advice of being able to action the outcomes, get them implemented, and actually create change inside these organizations, and really helping to integrate accessibility into these different development life cycles and the different releases. So we are delivering, not only really great websites, but accessible websites as well. And then obviously the ongoing training and support to keep the websites accessible, trainings, education. It's just a really great partnership to help us achieve and take that step further when it comes to digital governance and digital governance processes and programs. Our aim is to not only deliver a really great website, or really great digital experience, but accessible ones as well. So helping to just tell the story of the different policies and standards and the impact that accessibility can make. So sorry, Jenna, I hope I didn't talk a bit, I'll let you jump in there as well. There's, but that's the things that I've personally found that, really help, create an excellent digital accessibility program inside organizations.
Yeah, no apologies needed. We're a team and going through the experience together. And I know we've had a lot of eye-opening moments together. I think, one thing to remember is accessibility isn't included right now in educational programs and training programs. So I think there's an expectation placed on a developer, for example, or marketing or social media person, that they can internally within an organization manage the accessibility, especially when there's legal action. So to your point of specialists, that's really where I've found that we have been effective. And I think what's been interesting is that most companies have grossly underestimated the amount of accessibility remediation that they need and work to be done. So we've been highly effective in helping organizations find those resources, prioritize issues, et cetera, more so than some other reports and things that we've seen. So, you know, we've both seen organizations, well, we've done accessibility for 5 years, we've worked with multiple vendors, we don't really have any issues, and we do an initial round audit and there are many issues. So, you know, that's been pretty eye-opening and something I think we've all seen together, but that's where an organization can really use help, is understanding where the gaps are. Again, with the EAA standardizing those requirements, it's going to be a lot easier to identify and prioritize. So as Chris said, it is an exciting time so that organizations have a better target and we can really work with them to say, these are the key issues that are going to be high legal risk, that are going to create the biggest barriers for users and for extending your market reach. So it's a good time and something exciting to look forward to.
Absolutely. That was awesome. I love hearing us talk about, like, you know, the real problems that we're looking to solve and how we help customers, because I mean that's what really drives us every day is working with those clients, you know, hand to hand, and you know, helping them kind of build something that wasn't achievable without us. And so we're super excited about the opportunity ahead of us, and you know, the opportunity to impact what we see as such a critical need in the digital world that we live in today. And so with that, I want to thank you both for taking the time and kind of sharing your thoughts and perspectives. It's been super enlightening, and looking forward to future conversations where we can tackle some of these other topics in more detail and continue the conversation back with those of you who are listening. And we would love to engage further, right? So if you have questions or comments, feedback, anything, please share that with us. Get in touch with us. Let us you know, understand your needs and see where we can help. We're always ready and excited to do that. So with that, I thank you all and hope everyone has a good rest of their day, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
guys.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks,
All
Dylan.
right.